The bloody path of a fierce nation. The Han were a nomadic minority ethnic group in northern China during the Qin and Han dynasties. According to the record of expanding territories, they were descendants of xiongnu, the son of Xia Jie, the last emperor of the Xia dynasty. After being defeated in the Battle of Mingtiao, xiongnu led the remnants of his people to flee north, where they settled, multiplied, and gradually formed a powerful ethnic group known as the Han. This nation was renowned for its bravery in battle, cunning, and extreme ferocity. Many believe that hatred and savagery coursed through the veins of the Han. Their leader, the xiongnu, was akin to an emperor, and his successors inherited these traits, striking fear into the hearts of the Central Plains ethnic groups. The people living in the Hetao region lived in constant dread for generations, and even within their own tribes, the Han engaged in brutal internal conflicts. During the Warring States period, notable generals such as Qin Kai of Yan, Li Mu of Zhao, and Meng Tian of Qin fought and defeated the Han. In the early Qin dynasty, the Han were not particularly powerful. To the south lay the mighty Qin state, to the west the thriving Yuezhi, and to the east the formidable Hu people, leaving the Han surrounded by enemies. This precarious situation forced the xiongnu Qiongnu to continue migrating northward. Later, when peasant uprisings erupted in the Qin state to the south and the renowned General Meng Tian died, the 100,000-strong Qin army stationed in the north to defend against the Han was recalled to suppress various feudal lords. This gave the Han a golden opportunity. They rapidly expanded their military, soon forming a formidable force that could not be ignored. During this period, a terrifying figure emerged, Modu, the crown prince of the Han Xiongnu Tuman. Born into such a family, Modu was expected to inherit his father's throne and lead the Han. However, the events that followed were far from straightforward. To begin with, Modu was not favored by his father. His personality and appearance were not particularly likable. Like many emperors throughout history, Tuman loved both power and beauty. He was deeply enamored with his newly wedded, beautiful queen, the Yenji, who bore him a charming and handsome son. Tuman doted on both the Yenji and this younger son, and his affection clouded his judgment. He conceived a bold and sinister plan to depose Modu as crown prince and name his younger son as heir. Unable to confront Modu directly, Tuman devised a cruel scheme. He sent Modu to the distant Yuezhi state in the north as a hostage. This practice was reminiscent of those in the Central Plains during the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods. However, Tuman's unilateral decision was highly unwelcome to the Yuezhi, who were reluctant to host a foreign prince and feed him for nothing. Diplomatic relations forced them to grudgingly accept, but Modu was treated poorly in the Yuezhi state, enduring disdain and humiliation. As the future king of the Han, Modu should have been living a princely life in the royal court. Instead, he faced cold indifference, which would have been unbearable for anyone. During his time among the Yuezhi, Modu deeply understood the harshness of human nature and the fickleness of relationships. He felt an unprecedented sense of desolation and loneliness, stripped of familial love, and often unable to even secure a decent meal. The Yuezhi looked at him as if he were a useless animal, unworthy of sharing their scarce food, especially in the harsh northern climate where resources were already limited. Their resentment toward feeding an idle outsider was palpable. Desperate, Modu borrowed a bow and a warhorse from the Yuezhi and began hunting. Over time, they saw a brave young man roaming the mountains and forests, out hunting everyone else, and even sharing his surplus game with the Yuezhi. Yet, this did little to improve their relationship. They viewed his contributions as an obligation, akin to a tenant paying rent. Modu's heart was thoroughly broken. He had no friends, and he realized that relying on groveling or begging for favor was futile. True power and respect could only be earned through strength and self-reliance. Then, devastating news reached him. His most trusted kin had betrayed him in the cruelest way. Influenced by the Yenji, Tuman plotted to have Modu killed by the Yuezhi. After much deliberation, Tuman devised a plan. He would attack the Yuezhi, but not too aggressively, just enough to provoke them into executing Modu. Modu had heard rumors of his father's desire to make his younger brother the heir, but he never believed his father would go so far as to harm him. The harsh reality shattered him. The Yuezhi were attacked without provocation, giving them ample reason to eliminate Modu at any moment. This betrayal awakened him to a brutal truth. No one in this world could be trusted. No matter how well he treated others, he would receive no mercy. Even his own father had turned against him. In that moment, Modu realized that only by becoming powerful could he command respect. A new plan formed in his mind. As war broke out in the Yuezhi lands, several gleaming, curved blades flashed before Modu's eyes. A group of Yuezhi soldiers stormed his tent, intending to capture him alive and use his head to end the conflict. But they underestimated Modu. He had transformed into a bloodthirsty demon. Facing the Yuezhi's oppression and his father's betrayal, the blood in his veins turned black with rage. "Farewell, great Yuezhi," Modu declared. In an instant, he raised his blade and cut down the attacking soldiers. Under the cover of moonlight, he leapt onto a pre-prepared, swift-blooded steed and galloped away. His heart burned with fury, vowing to reclaim everything he had lost, no matter the cost. When one's life is threatened, unimaginable madness can erupt. A demon lurking in the shadows was about to be unleashed, and a gruesome slaughter was slowly unfolding. Though the Hun were ferocious, they were straightforward in their thinking. When xiongnu two-man saw his son return on horseback, he was both shocked and delighted. He admired Modu's bravery and cunning, feeling a pang of guilt for his past actions. To make amends, two-man made a fateful decision. He assigned 10,000 elite cavalry to Modu's command. One cannot help but wonder, did two-man truly understand his long-estranged son? Did he know the depths of Modu's true feelings? Two-man imagined his son as a great hero, a capable right-hand man. Unfortunately, the Modu of the present was not the Modu of the past. He harbored a deep-seated hatred for his father, viewing him as an enemy. Modu swore to eradicate everyone who had wronged him. However, the path ahead was not smooth. The 10,000 cavalry assigned by two-man were loyal to the xiongnu, not Modu. Gaining their obedience would be no easy task. Leading an unfamiliar force in a rebellion would be suicidal. Yet this rare opportunity to command such a force could not be wasted. Modu racked his brain for a solution. Then, a ruthless idea struck him. He would eliminate all obstacles to his glorious destiny in one fell swoop. Modu began training the 10,000 cavalry, focusing on a single skill, archery. At first, the soldiers laughed at the idea of archery training. "We've grown up on the grasslands, riding horses and shooting arrows since childhood. What's there to learn?" they mocked. When Modu explained the essentials of archery, their disdain only grew, their tongues wagging in contempt for their new leader. Standing before the troops, Modu shouted, "When I shoot, you shoot. Wherever I aim, you aim. Anyone who disobeys will be executed without mercy." Though the command carried a death threat, it seemed simple enough. Modu didn't demand accuracy, just that they shoot. The training proceeded in phases. In the first phase, Modu led the cavalry onto the grasslands. Whenever a bird or beast appeared, he would draw his bow and shoot. Many soldiers, distracted or slow to react, failed to follow suit. They assumed that since they hadn't seen the target clearly or hadn't deliberately disobeyed, Modu would let it slide. But to Modu, these men were mere tools. What was there to hesitate about? He ordered all who failed to shoot to be executed. The grasslands echoed with wails of agony. Modu, expressionless, mounted his steed and rode off as if nothing had happened, continuing his search for the next target. This act terrified the Hunnish cavalry. Their new commander was deadly serious, and his orders were not to be taken lightly. They dared not slack off, knowing that every move Modu made could mean life or death. The first phase ended quickly, but Modu was far from satisfied. His plan was still far from complete. He soon initiated the second phase. One day, after returning from a hunt, Modu suddenly drew his sword and shot an arrow. The soldiers instinctively drew their bows, but some hesitated when they saw the target. It wasn't a wild animal. It was the prize steed that had carried Modu to safety from the Yuezhi. Modu treated this horse like an old friend, feeding and grooming it daily with a rare warmth in his eyes. This horse had saved his life, a debt as heavy as a mountain. Had Modu made a mistake? Many soldiers held back, unwilling to shoot. But the majority followed his lead, and the horse let out a piercing cry before collapsing in a pool of blood. Horses are sentient creatures, and this one died not understanding why its master had turned on it. Horse, for the sake of my empire, I must sacrifice you. If I can do this to a mere beast, what of friends or kin? I would shoot them all the same, Modu thought, his eyes devoid of remorse, filled only with murderous intent. Who didn't shoot? Seize them and execute them, Modu roared. Since they were near the camp, the cries of the slain soldiers and their families filled the air, creating a horrific scene. This terrifying training session came to a temporary end, but Modu's unease persisted. His ultimate target was his father, Two-Man. Even if these soldiers could kill his beloved horse, would they dare raise their bows against the supreme leader of the hunt? To ensure absolute obedience, Modu needed to desensitize them to killing, stripping them of all humanity until they saw obedience as their sole purpose. Another idea flashed through his mind. If the soldiers could pass this final test, his grand ambitions would be within reach. Modu's next plan was beyond anyone's imagination. He had a virtuous and devoted wife whom he deeply loved, and their affection was well known among the troops. The soldiers believed she was the one person Modu trusted above all. One day, Modu went hunting and deliberately brought his beloved wife along. He shot an arrow at a target and asked his beautiful wife to retrieve the game. Without hesitation, she galloped toward the target. Modu's expression turned strange. Moments ago, he had been laughing and chatting warmly with her, but now he raised his bow and fired. The soldiers, conditioned to follow, drew their bows as well. When they saw the target, they froze in shock. It was Modu's wife. Thousands of arrows pierced her body, transforming the grassland beauty into a grotesque, hedgehog-like figure. Modu turned to his soldiers. Both those who shot and those who didn't were gripped with terror, unable to believe what they had witnessed. With a cold laugh, Modu ordered all who had failed to shoot to step forward. One by one, their heads were severed, becoming true sacrifices to accompany his wife. Modu looked at the remaining soldiers with satisfaction. He knew they were no longer human. They had become true killing machines. Confident in his unprecedented cruelty and ruthlessness, he had forged an army completely under his control. My empire, my greatest love, he thought. Next, I'll deal with the old man. Two-Man, meanwhile, was torn by conflicting emotions. His younger son seemed sweet and obedient, but lacked the intellect to become the future xiongnu. To revive the Han, Modu was the only suitable candidate. However, his beloved Yinji insisted on naming the younger son as heir and eliminating Modu. This left Two-Man in a dilemma. Still, he was relieved that despite his past wrongs, Modu showed no resentment and often served him dutifully. This lowered Two-Man's guard. He frequently took Modu hunting, with Modu's troops trailing behind. One day, Modu accompanied his father on a hunt, but deliberately lagged behind, keeping some distance. As they reached the hunting grounds, Two-Man suddenly charged toward a target. Seizing the moment, Modu drew his bow, and his soldiers followed suit. Thousands of arrows rained down, striking Two-Man. A generation's hero, who had led the Hun for decades, met his end. In his selfish pursuit of power, Two-Man had cultivated a peerless demon, only to perish by that demon's hand. The coup was so sudden that Two-Man's soldiers were caught off guard. By the time they reacted, they knew an era had ended. They knelt before their new master, pledging their loyalty. The nomadic tribes of the north held a deep-rooted belief that only the strongest could lead them to survival, a belief proven by reality. However, the Hunnish nobility, with their vast wealth, were less willing to submit to an untrustworthy stranger. Modu, however, showed them no mercy. Upon returning to Two-Man's tribe, he ordered his soldiers to seize the Yinji, his stepmother, and his half-brother. Without hesitation, he raised his blade and beheaded them both. Dealing with Two-Man's remaining forces was equally brutal. Those who obeyed were spared, while any hint of resistance was met with decapitation. Thus, Modu swiftly consolidated power and declared himself xiongnu in 209 BCE. The same year Qin's second emperor, Huai, ascended the throne. With the throne secured, Modu pondered whether he could hold it. He was merely the leader of the Han, surrounded by powerful neighbors threatening his rule. Although Huai's ascension had plunged the southern Qin Empire into chaos and decline, dangers still loomed, particularly from the eastern Hu people, a formidable enemy that kept Modu on edge. The Donghu, seeing a new leader among the Han, sought to test him. They demanded Tumen's prized thousand-mile horse. Modu's generals protested, arguing that such a treasure could not be given away. Modu, however, smiled and said, "Why quarrel with a neighbor over a horse?" He sent the horse to the Donghu. Believing Modu was weak, the Donghu grew bolder. They sent envoys demanding one of Modu's cherished women, an act that would enrage any man with pride. His ministers urged him to attack the Donghu and teach them a lesson. Modu, however, smiled faintly and said, "Why ruin relations with a neighbor over a woman?" He sent the woman to the Donghu. What a coward, the Hunnish people thought. Where's the courage he showed when he killed his wife and father? He's just a bully at home, spineless against foreigners. Donghu sent another demand: land. Modu's ministers, assuming he would comply as before, suggested giving it up. But this time, Modu revealed his true colors. Land is the foundation of a nation, he declared. He executed all who had advocated trading land for peace. Modu's intentions were impossible to predict. Agree with him, and he might call you wrong. Disagree, and he might call you right. There was only one chance to answer, and a wrong answer meant death. His tyrannical rule left his ministers trembling in fear. The inevitable unfolded unpredictably. Modu mounted his horse, raised his blade, and led millions of troops, decreeing that any who disobeyed would be beheaded. The Hunnish army's morale surged. Though Modu's temperament was erratic, following him into battle was a sure bet, a consensus within the tribe. The Donghu, overconfident from their successful extortions, underestimated Modu. His forces swept through their lands like a tidal wave, burning, killing, and plundering. The once mighty Donghu were crushed, with countless captives and livestock seized. On his return, Modu recalled the humiliations he had suffered at the hands of the Western Yuezhi. Without resting, he turned his army westward, obliterating the Yuezhi and securing the Western Front. Taking advantage of the Qin's internal turmoil, Modu reclaimed all the territories Meng Tian had once wrested from the Han. This campaign unified the northern and southern deserts, establishing a powerful slave-based empire. From then on, the Han dominated the northern plains, becoming the most formidable and dangerous enemy of the Central Plains dynasties. After unifying the desert, Modu implemented harsh laws to maintain his rule. Minor offenses were punished with facial branding, while serious crimes warranted execution. Imprisonment rarely lasted more than 10 days, so Hunnish jails held few prisoners, but the tribes were filled with soldiers and civilians bearing scarred faces. A reminder that lawbreaking brought pain. Modu's reign saw widespread human sacrifice. When a noble died, hundreds or even thousands of living people were executed to accompany them, particularly the deceased's favored consorts, who were required to be buried alongside. In warfare, Modu introduced a reward system. Those who beheaded enemies could keep their spoils and receive a jug of wine. Conquered peoples became slaves to their conquerors. This policy led to a lack of strategy in Hunnish warfare, as each soldier fought for personal gain, resulting in a severe loss of humanitarian values, an utterly inhumane system. Modu's cruelty and oppressive rule pushed dehumanization to its extreme. During his lifetime, Central Plains figures like Han Xian and Liu Bang suffered at his hands, and even Empress Liu was humiliated. These prominent figures could not counter this bloodthirsty and savage enemy. Under Modu's rule, people were divided into two categories: beasts and livestock. They grew accustomed to his reign of terror, accepting their roles as slaves without complaint. They knew that to survive, they either had to adopt his ruthless ways or endure unimaginable humiliation in silence. This human demon ruled the Han for 36 years, until his death in 174 BC, the 6th year of Emperor Wen of Han. Everything he did, no matter how unthinkable, was to secure his throne, and he succeeded. However, His methods twisted the humanity of an entire nation, turning men into wolves and wolves into tigers. The Han who followed inherited this legacy of savagery, as if Modu's spirit lingered. For centuries, this nation clashed with the Han Chinese, inspiring both fear and an inescapable presence.